There are a slew of unique legal aspects to Donald Trump's Georgia election interference case. And so we are lucky to have CBS News legal analyst Rikki Klieman, who joins me now. Rikki, I want to step back for a minute and get your assessment of the strength of the case, the RICO case against the former president, before we wrestle with some of these more immediate details.
I think there can be no doubt that this case is strong. It consists of 98 pages. You have a story that is told by 161 overt acts. And what those are paragraphs describing each action that each defendant took according to the prosecution. You also have specific crimes after that, which various defendants are charged with. There is no doubt that the case is mammoth. It's one of those cases, John, that if it does in fact go to trial with any number of defendants, let's call it 10 defendants, and 9 of them plead, or let's call it 19 defendants, that this is a trial that will take months, could even take a year. RICO cases are complex by their very nature, John, because the acts of one become attributable to the acts of all.
Right. So I want to ask you now about former President Trump's, his new attorney, Sadow, who is representing him in Georgia. You've actually tried cases with Sadow. What can you tell him? And then I want to ask you about a specific act he took today. But what is his, what's he like, and what does this mean about the legal strategy that the president is likely to adopt?
Well, I've tried cases with Steve Sadow for years, years ago. We tried cases that were big conspiracy cases, multiple defendant cases that lasted months on end. When you get to know someone in that way, when a group of defense attorneys decides to rent a large house and be able to work together as many hours as you are possibly awake, you understand what people's expertise really is. Steve Sadow is what I call the law man. He is someone who everyone would turn to about issues of law, issues of evidence, issues of procedure. He's someone who has an extraordinary memory, where a judge can ask him for a precedent, and without any paperwork in front of him, he can come forward with the law of the case from some case long ago. So in this particular indictment, one of the things that Steve Sadow is going to do is file a flurry of motions having to do with motions to dismiss. And he's not only going to want to dismiss the entire indictment outright, but he'll go count by count. And this is someone who carries himself in a way, John, where when he speaks, you listen. He is someone who has an aura of authority. He is not a showman. He is not a showboater. He is a real lawyer.
So what then do you make of his decision today? And Kenneth Chesebro, who is another named member of this RICO case. Chesebro, a lawyer, asked to have a speedy trial and has apparently been granted it. Trial is set for the 23rd of October. And Sadow has asked to sever former President Trump from Chesebro. What do you make of all that machinations?
Well, it was a very smart move. It was a smart move, John, and he did it fast. There is no way that Donald Trump, or probably most, if not all, of the other defendants would want a speedy trial. Many of these lawyers, not just Steve Sadow, but many of these lawyers have just been brought on this case. The amount of material that they have to digest in order to be able to get ready to try the case on October 23rd, that's almost an absurdity. It almost cannot be done, even with those 24/7 work schedules. So you move to sever. Let Chesebro have a speedy trial. Donald Trump doesn't want a speedy trial, and in great part because Donald Trump wants to take his time to file these motions. So I think that Sadow's move was appropriate. It was smart.
Let me ask you this very quickly, Rikki. What's Chesebro's game then? Why does he want it to move quickly? And just from a political perspective, I'll just ask you one question at a time. Why would he want to move quickly?
Heaven only knows, John. I have no idea. The only thing that he could have done was to try to call Fani Willis's bluff. Fani Willis said she was ready. So it is perhaps possible that Chesebro's lawyers decided to see if she really meant it. Because you understand that when you move for a speedy trial, if that trial does not occur, the sanction is dismissal. Yeah. So he may have really taken her up and on her words, and she says she's ready to go.
A lot more of those nights with very little sleep ahead for a whole bunch of lawyers. Rikki Klieman, thanks so much for being with us. As we've been covering, former President Donald Trump has left the Fulton County Jail after being booked by officials in the Georgia 2020 election criminal case. He faces 13 counts, including racketeering and conspiracy. We expect a booking photo, also known as a mugshot, of the former president to be released, as has been the case with those that have already been booked in this case. Let's turn to CBS News Homeland Security and Justice reporter Nicole Sganga, who joins us now from outside the jail. Nicole, former President Trump left moments ago. That seemed fast.
It was a quick processing, John, less than 30 minutes in and out, law enforcement expediting that process. Part of the reason why that process was expedited is he, of course, had the bond agreement worked out ahead of schedule. And so getting the president in, fingerprinting him, getting his height, his weight, all of that, and of course the mugshot, and then getting him out. He is now en route to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport here in Atlanta, where he will head back home. And you mentioned earlier, the privileges and the comforts of the presidency in rougher quarters inside the Fulton County Jail, and they are rougher quarters. In fact, that jail now under investigation by the Department of Justice. That investigation opened up last month into the conditions at the jailhouse after reports of prisoner malnutrition, structural flaws with the building itself, and even bug infestations. 5 have died in custody in that jailhouse this year alone, John. But the president moving very quickly and would have seen very little of that. The hallways would have been cleared for his processing there, and he would have moved in and out of the Sallyport, that secured garage, and been back on his way. He will return, of course, to Atlanta in just a couple of weeks for his anticipated arraignment, where he will then appear before the judge and, as we've been talking about, enter a plea which will be televised.
Nicole, you reported earlier that there are some supporters of the former president there who were aligning themselves strategically so that no matter what entrance he used, that he would see some people on his side there rooting for him. Did that take place? Did they snap into action? Was it even time for that, since he was in and out so fast?
Well, John, I can tell you here on the Rice Street side of Fulton County Jail, this is not where the president entered, but as word spread that the former president was being booked, the sort of carnival atmosphere that we had witnessed throughout the day, with chanting and different signs being donned here by supporters, sombered a bit as the stark reality of the former president going through the criminal justice process really sunk in. It quieted here. It had been a bit more rambunctious of an atmosphere, and as the supporters learned of former President Donald Trump's presence here, it started to sort of die down, some of that energy that we had seen earlier in the day. That being said, there were supporters at both entrances just positioning themselves to get a glimpse of the former president. And as you mentioned, as many supporters told me, we're hoping that he would get a glimpse of them so that he understood their support and their support of him moving forward in 2024.
Nicole Sganga, thank you. Back now to CBS News reporter Graham Cates, who is outside the courthouse in Atlanta. Graham, the former president shook up his legal team. What do you know? What have you heard? Rikki Klieman told us about Steve Sadow. What else are we hearing about this new approach and this new representation?
Sure. Well, Rikki knows from personal experience what turns out is a really tremendous reputation here in Atlanta for Stephen Sadow. He's known and very well respected in the city for handling a lot of really big cases, a lot of racketeering cases, and a lot of kind of complex litigation. And so his hiring is a sign that they're trying to get the best that they can to represent Trump in this moving forward. You know, not just someone who's going to go on TV and make the right talking points for him, but someone who's actually going to put forward the best case for him.
Graham, is there any evidence so it looks like Kenneth Chesebro has delinked from the president's case. Is there any evidence any of the other people who have been named in this indictment will be doing something similar? Or, according, as I understand it, the judge has decided that Kenneth Chesebro's case can go forward, and then everybody else is still connected. Is the expectation that that will be the way it goes, or that some others might break off as well?
Oh, you know, at this point, I don't think you could say how it's going to play out with the other 18. It's obviously within the realm of possibility, and I don't believe that they would have to make that decision, you know, anytime in the next couple of weeks. This is going to be a very long process to get from here to, if we're going to have more than a dozen people, let's say, at trial together. It is not going to be some process that plays out in the next couple of months and the next even like half year, right? We're talking about a long process to get from here to there. And so maybe they all end up linked. But we've already seen in terms of how their legal fees are being paid for, there had been, prior to here, Trump and some of his other allies who've faced legal issues in the last year or so have had their fees paid for by a PAC called Save America that he founded, and that's ostensibly in support of his campaign. But we've already seen at least one of the defendants kind of, at least publicly, shy away from Save America. Jenna Ellis has a GoFundMe for her legal costs. And that doesn't mean she's breaking away from the PAC, but at the very least, she's pulling away from the purse strings that Trump could have over the other defendants.
Fascinating second round of things to watch in this. Graham Cates, thanks so much.